Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Each Friday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, I host an episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest today is Brad Blickstein. Brad is with Barretts and Burnell, or B&B. A legal industry futurist, Brad has developed a national reputation for his insight into the changing ways that legal services are consumed and delivered in the modern marketplace. He co-heads B&B's New Law Practice Group. As in that role, he helps clients see the future, educating them on the industry's evolution of legal services and their consumption. He also helps position clients for success by developing novel products, systems, and solutions which make the delivery of legal services more modern and efficient. In addition, Brad is the founder and principal of Blickstein Group, which is the leading industry intelligence firm focused on helping legal service providers better understand and serve their clients and providing information about law departments and legal operations. I could go on at length, but let's bring Brad on and talk with him. So Brad, welcome. I'd like
George?
it.
Hello?
Yep. Okay, have you not got sound?
I'm sorry, one more time, George?
Can you hear me?
Now I can. You had frozen for a moment.
Okay, we're getting Brad at a, I don't know where he's at. He's in an airport or someplace joining us as he is able to in his busy schedule. So hopefully we won't have too many disruptions along the way. But I'd like you to start out by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do now, and why you do what you do, where you do it, if all of that makes sense.
That's a great question. Well, one of the reasons that I do what I do where I do it is because at B&B, they write really good bios. And I really appreciate you reading most of it for us today, George. That was great.
Just a portion.
So I launched my career, I started my career, I was one of the founders of what was then known as Corporate Legal Times magazine, and I did that for about 12 years. That was the first magazine specifically for in-house counsel, and I handled a lot of our sort of legal tech clients while I was there. So when I left the magazine, this was back in 2002 when I left, I opened up my own consulting shop where I did sort of strategic and marketing related work, outsourced CMO work for legal techs, including e-discovery companies, and then started my research wing in about 2008, largely focusing on, again, legal tech and law department operations. Over time, what I realized is that as law firms start to innovate, or as I like to describe it, find new legal service delivery models, bringing those to market is not, you don't do that in the way that you normally bring law firm services to market, right? You don't do it with sort of, hey, our guy went to Harvard, our guy used to work for the government. And at that moment, the clients are looking to buy efficiency or cost savings or process or, the kinds of things that we live and breathe all the time. And it sort of occurred to me that law firms needed help bringing their technology to market, their innovative tools, their new law service, their new legal service delivery models, or as I shorten it, I like to call it new law, to market. And that's when I joined up with my friends at B&B. They have been traditionally a marketing firm for law firms in the traditional way. So, what I bring to the table is the understanding of how legal techs and ALSPs work and how to bring those types of things to market, which is what law firms are building all the time. And what they bring is really a deep understanding of law firms that I never had, because I stayed on the really what I call the support side of the market, the legal techs and ALSPs, for so long, and the client side too. So it's been a really good partnership, and that's really the idea. So and one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you is because if you think about how what law firms are building, law firms, ALSPs, and legal techs too, if you look at it sort of through an engineering lens, it looks a lot like e-discovery. So I think, you called me a futurist. That obviously is because Spencer Barrett's called me a futurist. But as we do look to the future, I do think a lot more of the legal industry is going to look a lot like the e-discovery industry looks now.
Well, and you and I have been at conferences over the years where you have been in that futurist role, getting up in front of the audience and trying to take a look into the crystal ball to figure out what may come next. Part of what you're doing is helping deliver what may come next with the new legal service delivery models. Go into depth a little more about what you mean by that phrase.
Sure. And sticking on the law firm side for a minute, I don't love to define things by what they're not, but it's probably the best way here, and if you think about how law firms traditionally have done business, it's what, one lawyer looks at one piece of work, does whatever they need to do with it, then moves on to the next piece of work and does the same thing or a different thing on that piece of work. Not much process, not much technology enablement. Almost always on the hourly bill. Again, in our case, I think we're talking about big law for the most part here, and even medium-sized law. We're not consumer type stuff.
It sounds like that is very much akin to what I continue to hear frequently from folks at law firms, which is every lawsuit is every piece of work, but every lawsuit is different. Every lawsuit is special. You cannot build a process that lets you go from lawsuit to lawsuit to lawsuit, applying that process. That approach to things never seemed to make sense to me, because when I was in a law firm, we would set up teams to run processes. We didn't call them that, of course, but that's what we were doing. How does that fit in with this?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you're a lawyer, it makes sense that you would look at the world that way, right? Because you're focused on the legal issues, and legal issues are usually different from matter to matter. But if you look at it more like an engineer would, you start to see commonalities in the processes. And I mean, if you think that you and I have been around the e-discovery world long ago, 20 years ago, we heard the same thing about document review and e-discovery, right? Like, machines could never help with that. Like, it's every document is different. And now you would be laughed out of the room if you. So as the legal world evolves, we're seeing, if you look at it more like engineers do, you're seeing more and more work that has more commonalities and is appropriate for process and technology, just like we've all learned years ago that e-discovery generally is. There's some work that's not. I don't want a machine writing my merger agreement. I don't want a machine setting my litigation strategy and deciding whether or not I should try or settle. But there's a lot of work that can be done through better process and technology enablement that lends itself to these new delivery models.
You might, however, want a system that offered some suggestions and some guidance. If you are planning to do this, you might want to do A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. Or given the previous 3 steps you've taken, you might want to consider doing this 4th step. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you also might want to say, hey, 35 times out of the last 50, someone has taken these 3 steps and it's worked, right? Like if you want to get really sophisticated in what predictive technology can do. And really the whole point is that there's all kinds of areas of the law that are much riper for any of these types of things than it would be when I say the lawyers, I really mean like the lawyers who think only traditionally think there is. And again, I think it's because they like to look at the legal issues, as they should. That's what they're trained to look at. They've been trained to look at the legal issues. But they can feel a lot different from each other more than like what it takes to come up with the decisions around the legal issues.
What are some of those areas, and what might be common factors across them?
Yes, I think common factors across. I'll answer the second part first. Is largely, I think common's the right word. It's like, is there something in there that's a repeatable process? Are there things that are getting done over and over again? And are there elements that can be really that can benefit from a real workflow and some real tech behind it? I'll give you an example. The most famous example these days outside of e-discovery is certainly like NDAs, right? Like the process of negotiating and reviewing NDAs. That's very commonplace in contract management. But there are tools that will write the first drafts of pleadings and interrogatory responses. There are self-service tools that will help you build, that will help you with your compliance needs and will help you build the paperwork for those, for that. Wilson Sonsini's subsidiary, 650, is a great example of that, right? Like they're bringing all kinds of Wilson Sonsini level expertise into an expert system that lawyers that are in-house at small companies can use to build the key documents they need to stay in compliance with state and federal regulations and international regulations without even calling a lawyer, right? Because the expertise is built into the system. And if you need some expertise that's not in the system, well, that's what the law firm's for. It's really very effective. So there's all kinds of self-service models out there. And then, of course, there's just straight like workflow technology enablement that helps keep track of where things are, that helps you build process, that makes sure the right people are doing the right work. In an e-discovery context, it's a the first level review versus the second level review versus privilege review versus, maybe a sample that has to be reviewed by even a partner at a firm, right? But it's still a matter of which documents have to be seen by which people and who are those people and how do you build that plan? And when you start applying that to contract management and IP renewals and employment law, there's all kinds of other places that again, if you squint and look at it like an engineer would, start to look a lot more like discovery.
So, listening to what you're saying, it sounds as if a big part of what you're describing is automation of processes and automation of decision-making components of processes. If that's right, does this form of new legal service delivery models, does this all stop there, or does it go beyond that? Or did I misunderstand?
No, I don't think you misunderstood, but I think it actually starts before the automation of process, and it often starts with the building of process, right? Like before we can automate it, we got to document it and figure out. First, we got to figure out what the process is, then optimize what the process should be, and then build. So a lot of people talk about people, process, technology, and then the question sometimes is which comes first. I'm a process guy. Like I feel like process comes first. You build your process, and other than maybe your leaders, then you figure out what people and technology you need to support the process that you think is best for the whatever you need to get done. That's my belief. But I think that so to answer your question, however, I think it does extend before the automating of process and past that as well. Of course, I mean when we, as we get more comfortable with things, as we get more comfortable with AI and AI gets better. I think we can see elements that are well past workflow automation and all the way to, closer to decision making. And we're seeing some products already in those areas.
On the law firm side, you gave one example already with Wilson Sonsini. Do you have any other examples?
Oh, sure. And it's funny how some firms that you never hear about are doing some amazing things in this area. There is a firm in New Jersey called Porzio. Like maybe 15 years ago, Porzio launched a subsidiary called Porzio Life Sciences. Porzio Life Sciences is basically builds something akin to self-service models for pharmaceutical compliance. This is a northern New Jersey law firm. Their clients are largely pharma companies, and all the different state laws and federal laws around compliance specific to pharma. They build basically expert systems for this. And at this point, if I understand correctly, the revenues of the subsidiary are big enough to be a nice standalone business on its own, if they were to choose that way. But the beauty of it is that like, 90, I'm guessing the number, but like 90% of the time, whatever the client is, and they sell on a subscription basis, by the way, no hourly bills for that. So you pay X dollars a year and you get access to this thing, use it how you want. It works like 90% of the time. Well, the 10% of the time that some issue is too complex for that system, well, who do you think they call? They call the law firm. It's a really symbiotic situation. And the key to it, there's a couple keys to it, but one is that they weren't trying to squeeze that thing into an hourly billing model. They're making more money with a different, frankly, more scalable model. And it's really a great, it's hard to break your business that way in a sense, but it can be so valuable. I mean, every other business has figured out, let's build scale, we'll all make more money. And there's no reason that shouldn't be the case in legal too.
It sounds as if this might be, if well executed, an opportunity to, if you will, have your cake and eat it too. Have these automated, scalable capabilities that also feed additional work to the law firm in its more traditional ways of accomplishing things.
Absolutely, because again, as you get up the complexity scale, there's some things that are harder to automate, that technology or process don't work as well for. At some point, for some issues, like you got a regulator calling you about an issue that they found on your paperwork. Like you need the best lawyer you can to figure out what you should do about that issue, right? Like you can't automate everything. But tying it together is a great way to do it, and it allows you to. I think a lot of firms, unfortunately, I think only think about some of these tools as marketing for the firm or business development for the firm in general. And I think that can be effective. That's not the worst idea. But if you're willing to think about different ways to do business, different business models for your firm, a lot of these tools, I keep saying tools, initiatives is probably a safer word. It can be extremely valuable in and of themselves and by the way, nice. What do the PE firms love? ARR. It's ARR. If you can ultimately sell that thing if you want to. If obviously you got to deal with the legal issues of spinning it out or whatever. But any law firm that can't do that probably shouldn't be in the business in the first place. But yeah, there's so much value in that. It's hard to do, and it's hard to do because it's so different from the current business model.
So it's a challenge for law firms
because.
Yeah, it's a challenge for law firms because this is very different from what most of them traditionally have done. However, it sounds as if this is an opportunity for them to expand. So this is a challenge, but an opportunity for law firms. The challenge, it's different from their traditional models. The opportunity, it gives them a chance to expand into new areas, expand revenue streams in new ways. Right?
That's exactly right, and that's it. And we don't want to overstate the challenge. I don't want to understate the challenge. I'm sorry. You see it a lot. Like, why are lawyers such dinosaurs? Why can't they? And like, it's hard. Like, if I went to you and said, like, okay, well, George, you've been making money this way for a long time. Why don't you do something totally different that is not really proven in your firm? And it's not just changing your billing model, maybe, but it's changing the whole way you're doing business. Like, you're asking. Forget about like lawyers are change averse. Anyone would be change averse to that. Like that's hard. Like that's high level stuff. So I have a lot more sympathy for the law firms than I used to about them not really being willing to make the moves that, from the outsider's point of view, it's so obvious that they should be thinking about.
But I mean, it's long said of law firms that they are, sole practitioners working under a common letterhead. So making those types of decisions often can be really challenging, right?
You know what? Yes and no. When you think firm-wide, absolutely. But what we're seeing a lot of is a lot of these types of initiatives start, and unfortunately sometimes end, but start in a practice group and often with a single client. A lot of the law firm innovation teams that we deal with, a lot of their best work comes from a lawyer, a partner at their own firm coming to them and say, my client has this problem. I can't easily solve that problem, but it sounds like something we could solve somehow if we built something and work together. And again, the fiefdom approach to law firms or the sole practitioner model that you described, in that it's really additive. It's helpful in that situation, right? Because you don't need to run a million things up a million flagpoles to get the whole company to shift. That the guy who runs that practice area, guy or woman who runs that practice area, can often find their own budget to serve their own client how they like. And so it's really where firms are challenged so much, and this is something I've seen in the past couple of years that surprised me a little bit, is once that happens, expanding throughout the rest of the firm is very difficult. Often you get firm leaders to be really excited about something, but the other partners, the partners at the firm are sort of, the response is very typically, oh, I love that our firm is doing this. Like, we are so innovative. It's such a benefit for us. It's so good. I'm so happy, so proud to be at a firm that innovates in this way. Oh, great. Well, do you use this tool with your clients? Oh, no, that's Bob's thing. Like, we don't need that in my practice group. But I'm so happy to be at a firm that does this. So, breaking through that wall and getting people to be more, less, maybe not quite as proud in the abstract, but actually, seeing the value in the short, every day for their own clients. That's going to be the challenge for a lot of firms as they start to rethink.
So how does the equation, the opportunities and the challenge differ if you look at legal service providers, and then again, if you look at corporate legal departments?
Yeah, so ultimately, it's all one ecosystem, right? It's the same work we're talking about here, no matter how it gets done. So, what I see happening, and it's starting to happen quite a bit already, is folks within the law department, I should say, often legal ops, are going to take a look at how different work needs to get done. And is this work that is appropriate, that it makes sense to, like, almost like a triage nurse, right? Like, is this project should be done in-house? Do we have the staff to do it in-house? Do we have the technology to do it in-house? Should we bring in new technology in-house? Should it go to a law firm? Should it go to an ALSP? Should it go to a law firm, but only if they have a captive ALSP, or only if they're willing to do this in a different way? There's all kinds of different. Where we've left this like duopoly where the only choices are the firm can do it or the law department can do it, and we're starting to find new ways to do all this work. And I think there's so much work that is ripe for these types of approaches. There's room for everybody in the market.
So I've often seen of late, in the last year or so, I've seen these discussions framed frequently as law firm versus ALSP, who's going to be the one to serve the legal department. I'm hearing you saying that maybe isn't the best way to frame this discussion.
Yeah, I would love to know, to figure out exactly what it is, but I think that probably a lot of people have heard this, I'm not the only one who says this, something like 60% of the work is that law departments do is appropriate for some sort of disruption. And if that's the case, law firms will win a bunch of it, and ALSPs will win a bunch of it. The value that law firms provide is that, or the advantage they have is that, their clients already like working with them and trust them. The disadvantage they have is they're not as good at process and technology. So I think, it's going to depend on the situation. But do I think that the market share of ALSPs in the Big Four is going to grow? Absolutely. But I also think that the demand for legal work, as we start to look at additional regulations, as we start to look at globalization, as we start to look at, probably more litigation as the courts, after a couple of years where there wasn't much, there's so much more work that even though I think the market share of the LSPs is going to go up, I think that the law firms who can figure out how to serve their clients well are going to be just fine.
So it's, once again, just as within e-discovery, it's not so much a question of getting a different slice of the same pie. It's a question of the bigger pie, helping people understand there's a potentially much bigger pie out there. Is that right? So a larger pie rather than a larger slice of the same pie.
That's right. Or maybe a better way to put it is the pie is growing. So even if your slice as a percentage gets smaller, you're still eating more chocolate.
Yeah. One of the other components to this is that we've started to see, I think, some examples of law firms and ALSPs working together to deliver new legal service, from new legal service delivery models. Do you have thoughts about that?
I think it's a great thing. I think that building a captive ALSP, and 35 AmLaw 100s have captive ALSPs, but building a captive ALSP is hard. It's not within the skill set of the typical law firm. And it can be a slow process to find the right people and to do it the right way, often with false starts. There are ALSPs out there that have already done it, and it is their skill set, and they're open for business. And I can promise you, if you're at a law firm, that if you want to partner with an ALSP on building something together or helping a client together, when you dial up those ALSPs, they will answer the phone. They are excited about doing business with firms and not always competing. And just like everything else we've learned in business over the past, 30 years, like it doesn't make sense to focus on elements that are not in your core, they're not in your company's skill set. When there's the same reason, even law firms like outsource, like no one does their own payroll. It's companies that are expert in that. Why would you do that? And it makes much more sense to partner with one that in many instances than it does to try to build it yourself.
Do you have examples, whether you can name them or not, where it's the full triangle? It's a law firm, ALSP, and corporation all working together toward a common form of new legal service delivery model?
Yeah, I'm not going to name any, especially not sort of off the top of my head, but sure, yeah, there are law firms where their captive ALSP is effectively a white labeled independent ALSP, where they bring in the work and they maybe control the work, but the work is largely done by outside providers. You see that in e-discovery quite a bit, right? And not that anyone's hiding anything from anybody necessarily, but ultimately the work is done by an outside provider. So there's that. But there's also situations where, I was surprised to learn. I was just on a panel last week with Kunal Chopra from Elevate. And I was surprised to learn that their first client ever at Elevate was a law firm. It was Perkins Coie. And, they work together to serve clients, I think not infrequently, as I understand it. So, yeah, there's definitely models. I mean, everyone should focus on what they do best and where the place they provide the most value is, generally speaking. And if you could do that, not only are you serving your clients really well, but it's probably more profitable for you and the best way to keep your people happy because they're doing the kind of work that they want to do.
How active do you see legal departments as being in this process?
Oh, extremely active. I mean, we're still in an area where most of this stuff is driven by the client. And we hear from law firms all the time, law firm innovation people, it's very hard for us to get something done around here if it's not asked for by a client. So clients are very involved in that. And by the way, some clients are forming their own ALSPs. I can speak of one that I won't name, but that company has big back office operations in India. And what they realized is why do I need your operations in India for document review or whatever? We have our own people who do tax review in India already. It's we already know, if our people know how to do that kind of work there, we can train them to do this kind of work there. We don't have to go through you. So we're starting to see that a little bit too, where a lot of departments are realizing that they have those own resources right within their company.
Well, Brad, you've given us a lot to think about. Something for everyone to hope for, something for everyone to be concerned about at the same time. Brad Blickstein is a partner and co-head of the new law practice at Barretts and Brunel, or B&B. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Thank you all for joining us today. Join us again next Friday. And Brad, thank you very much.
Thank you, George, and thanks to Reveal and ACEDS for having me. This was a lot of fun. I hope the listeners out there got some value.